A blessed day to each and every one of us. We are the Group 3, and our group is composed of 6 members for this discussion, namely Agustin Kate Ann, Balanag Alexandria, Elanga Elamay, Facun Camille, Mercado Jamari, and Pineda Rosalia. In this discussion, we will be talking about one of the basic sentence transformations, specifically the yes or no questions and WH questions transformations. But before we proceed to the discussion proper, let us first know our topic outline. So our discussion is divided into 7 partitions. First, we will define yes or no questions. Second, we will be giving examples. Third, we will diagram it. Fourth, we will be dealing about negative yes or no questions. Fifth, we will be defining WH questions. Sixth, we will be giving examples. And seventh, we will diagram it. For the definition and some examples of yes or no questions, let us have Ms. Agustin.
Thank you, Ms. Balanag. As what she said earlier, I will discuss what are yes or no questions. Do you have any idea on mind? These are also called closed questions. Formally, these are also known as polar or general questions because it is expected that answer is one of the following choices. It's either yes, that affirms the question, and no, which denies the question. But there are many other words that can also be used, such as yep, nope, and others if you are talking informally. When forming a yes or no question, it must include one of these verbs: be, do, have, or a modal verb. Always remember that it is impossible to ask a yes or no question without one of these verbs. For example, you want to ask if the dog can swim. Will you say, the dog swim? Isn't it more appropriate if you will add a modal verb and it would be like this: can the dog swim? Which do you think is better and correct? Now, I want you to analyze these following sentences first. Alright, these are examples of statements with parallel yes or no questions. Example number 1. The network could have rerun Star Trek again. If we want to change a sentence into a question, we just have to place the auxiliary verb on the first sentence, which is could, followed by the rest of the sentence. So it became, could the network have rerun Star Trek again? As you can see, it is only answerable by yes or no. Yes, it could, and no, it couldn't. Meaning, it's just asking for a simple confirmation. Example number 2. Barbara has been reading the book. Which is the auxiliary verb? It's has. So it became, has Barbara been reading the book? The case is same with the rest of the following examples. And for you to understand it well, here is Ms. Balanag for the continuation.
Thank you, Ms. Agustin. So, for the continuation of the discussion about yes or no questions, let us have these following sentences because these sentences will give us the idea of how we are going to transform a declarative sentence into an interrogative one. But let me ask first, does anyone have an idea? Okay then, let's just find out. So, here are the following examples. The first one is, could the network have rerun Star Trek again? The second one is, has Barbara been reading the book? And the third one is their new car sitting in the driveway? So, given the statements or given the questions, what can you observe? Okay, great. If you have said that the yes or no questions here are formed by moving the first auxiliary verb to the front of the sentence. Because, as we can see, the following questions were formed by moving the first auxiliary verb of the declarative sentence to the front of the sentence. For example, from the network could have rerun Star Trek again to could the network have rerun Star Trek again? The same is true with the second example. Originally, the sentence is, Barbara has been reading the book, but by moving the auxiliary verb to the front of the sentence, it became, has Barbara been reading the book? And finally, in the third example, the original statement is, their new car is sitting in the driveway, but by moving the word is, which is the auxiliary verb, to the front of the sentence, it became, is their new car sitting in the driveway? How about in our fourth example? How was it formed? Very good if you have said that the yes or no question is formed by moving the main verb be, which is the word is, to the front of the sentence. So originally, the sentence is, Twain is Jim's favorite author, but by moving the main verb be to the front of the sentence, it became, is Twain Jim's favorite author? In this example, from Bill turned off his computer to did Bill turn off his computer? What can you observe? What is the process? Great if you have said that the process is like this. If there is no auxiliary verb or be verb, auxiliary do appear at the beginning of the question where we would expect a regular auxiliary verb or be. So in here, of course, since the original statement is in the past tense, because as we can see, turned, so we will not use the word do. Instead we will use the word did. To summarize the process on how to transform a declarative sentence into an interrogative sentence, specifically a yes or no question, let us focus on this table. Number 1. In a declarative sentence, if there is no auxiliary verb or be, insert do as an auxiliary. And second, which is the last also, move the first auxiliary verb or be to the front of the sentence. And for us to learn how to diagram a yes or no question, let us have Miss Elanga.
Thank you, Ms. Balanag. So, good day everyone. This is the continuation of yes or no questions. I'm Elami Ilanga, and I will discuss the diagramming yes or no question. Phrase marker trees can represent the structures of sentences before and after the yes or no question's transformation applies. Now I will give a simple sentence to show you the phrase marker or the structures. For example, Barbara has been reading the book. So the formula is sentence number 5 is equal to noun phrase subscript 1 plus MV, symbol MV with subscript TR for transitive plus noun phrase 2 or subscript 2. So now we identified first the noun phrase, auxiliary verb phrase, and the MV with the subscript transitive. Our first noun phrase is Barbara. Noun phrase subscript 1. The noun phrase 1 or the noun phrase subscript 1 is functioned as the subject of the sentence, while the second NP or the noun phrase subscript 2 is the book, which functions as the direct object. So reading is represented by the symbol MV with the subscript TR for transitive, while has been is the auxiliary, has is the perfect tense, and been is the progressive. S5 or stands for sentence 5 are going to get at the top of every diagram or every structural formula. Then as we go down, below things will start to differ. It consists the NP and followed by verb phrase. So our noun phrase subscript 1 is Barbara. So verb phrase consists with main verb phrase and the noun phrase subscript 2, while the MVP or the main verb phrase consists with auxiliary and the symbol MV with transitive. So we will gonna put the has been in perfect and progressive. Should represent the symbol MV with transitive, while and noun phrase subscript 2 is the book. So we need to remember that the different subscript mean that the first NP and the second NP have a separate reference. That is, they name different person, places, or things. If a sentence contains a second noun phrase with a referent different from that of the subject noun phrase in a position directly following the verb, you can be sure that the verb is transitive. The yes or no question node in the auxiliary symbolize that this sentence structure underlies a yes or no question. In every other way, it is identical to declarative sentence. Barbara has been reading the book. So now, how are we going to make these sentences, or how are we going to make the sentence as a question? After a yes or no questions transformation applies, the auxiliary have moves in the front of the phrase marker. So now we will identify the auxiliary noun phrase subscript 1 and the noun phrase subscript 2. So has is the auxiliary perfect. Barbara is noun phrase 1 or noun phrase subscript 1. Been is auxiliary progressive. Reading is the symbol MV transitive, and the reading is the noun phrase subscript 2. So now we will going to make a diagram. Sentence number 5 consists with auxiliary, noun phrase 1 and the verb phrase. Our auxiliary perfect is has. Noun phrase 1, Barbara. Auxiliary progressive is been. Main verb phrase or our MV transitive is reading. And the noun phrase subscript 2 is the book. Read Kellogg diagram present yes or no question in the forms of the statements underlying them. The question analyzed with a phrase marker in example number 2 is represented with the red Kellogg diagram in this example. For the negative yes or no question will be discussed by Ms. Hapon. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elanga. For the next topic, it is all about negative yes or no questions. For negative sentences, one obvious difference between the two sentences is the presence of the word not, and we will discover a systematic pattern that can be described transformationally. To form a negative sentence in English, we must have an auxiliary verb or a main verb be, after which to have the word not. And if neither is present, a substitute auxiliary verb do must be used. Let's take a look at this sentence first. He opened his presents early. For letter A, did he open his presents early? It is in the question form. For letter B, he didn't open his presents early. Negative sentence. For letter C, didn't he open his presents early? Became negative question. Have you noticed the transformation? If yes, that's good. To become more clear, let's go for the next slide. He opened his presents early. Become, he didn't open his presents early. As you can see, do plus not are added for the second sentence. Not is inserted after the first auxiliary, which is do, when no other auxiliary is present. When making a question using negative yes or no, just like this example, didn't he open his presents early? Do plus not move the beginning. The word not move in the beginning. Or it just move and insert not in the beginning. For the summary, negative transformation. For the first one, in a positive sentence, if there is no auxiliary verb or be, insert do as an auxiliary verb. For the second one, insert not after the first auxiliary verb or be in the positive sentence. Thank you for listening. For the next discussion, Ms. Mercado.
Good day, everyone. I am Jammer Mercado and I'm your discussant for this topic. And thank you, Ms. Facun. Now, in this discussion, we are going to tackle the WH questions, or more specifically, how can we transform a sentence into a WH question? First, let us define what are the WH questions. WH questions are the terms used to refer to questions starting with WH and H. Examples: who, what, where, why, whose, when, how, and how much. For us to be enlightened and for us to understand more about the WH question, let us define them one by one and state an example. First, the WH question who. WH question who asks for a person. For example, who is your favorite singer? Next, the WH question what. In this WH question, it asks for things, idea, information, and action. Example, what are you holding? In this question, it asks for a thing. What are you thinking about? In this question, it asks for idea. Next, what kind of pet do you have? In this question, it asks for information. And lastly, what are you doing? In this question, it asks for an action. Next, we have the WH question where. Basically, it asks for a place. Example, where is the nearest hospital? Next, we have here the WH question why. It asks for a reason. Example, why did you lie to your mom? Next, we have the WH question when. It asks for a time. For example, when is Lisa's birthday? Next, we have the WH question whose. And this question asks for a possession. For example, whose cap is this? Next, we have the WH question which. Which asks for a choice. For example, which pair of shoes do you like? And lastly, we have the WH question how. And it asks for a manner. For example, how did you convince her to come? To sum up, these are questions with their corresponding WH questions to summarize them. First, the question what person. its counterpart is the WH question who or whom. Next, what non-human thing? Its counterpart is the WH question what. Next, which person or thing? Its corresponding WH question are which and what. And take note that the what act as a determiner. Next, what place? It corresponds with the WH question where. Next, for what reason? It corresponds with the WH question why. Next, at what time? Its counterpart WH question is when. And lastly, in what manner? Its corresponding WH question is how. Now that you know the basics of the WH questions, and now that you already know the meaning and how the WH question works, let us now proceed to our main discussion. Transforming the declarative sentence into WH questions. In order to describe the creation of WH questions, we can use the transformational process that describes the relationship between yes or no questions and declarative sentence to describe the WH question transformation. But take note that we will need to change it by adding 2 additional steps and modifying 1. The first step of the yes or no question transformation inserts do if there is no auxiliary or main verb be, as the question forms of the sentences above show. However, this is not quite the case with WH question. If the unknown is the subject, the word do is not required. The first step in transforming declarative sentences into WH questions, then, is to insert the auxiliary do if the constituent representing the unknown information is not the subject of the sentence, and if there is no auxiliary or the main verb be. The second step is to move the first auxiliary verb if there is no auxiliary to the front of the sentence. For us to understand better the steps on transforming a declarative sentence into a WH question, we provided some examples. Take note that the following examples that I'm going to discuss are just the initial steps in transforming a declarative sentence into a WH question. So the initial steps in doing this process are in transforming declarative sentence into WH questions, then is to insert the auxiliary do if the constituent representing the unknown information, and those are the indefinite expression like someone or something, and if it is not the subject of the sentence and there is no auxiliary or main verb be. And another step is to move the first auxiliary or main verb, if there is no auxiliary, to the front of the sentence. So let's proceed to our first declarative sentence. The first declarative sentence that we have is the sentence, "The judge will decide something." The first step that we need to do is to assess or to determine if the word do is required or not. In our first sentence, in this case, the word do is not required. Main reason is that we have an auxiliary, which is the word will. To avoid confusion, we mentioned a while back that we must insert the word do if the constituent representing the unknown information is not the subject of the sentence and if there is no auxiliary or main verb be. Yes, we have that constituent, which is the word something. But we also need to consider that we have an auxiliary, which is the word will. And this makes the first sentence does not require the word do. So let's proceed to the next step. The next step that we are going to do is to move the first auxiliary, which is the word will. And if we are going to move the auxiliary in the first part of the sentence, we are going to have will the judge decide something? And it is noticeable that we already formed a yes or no question. But afterwards, this yes or no question will be transformed into a WH question. The next declarative sentence that we have is the sentence Dan has gone somewhere. Same with the previous sentence. We must first determine or to figure out if it needs a do or it does not. So in this case, the second sentence does not also require the word do because it has an auxiliary, which is the word has. So the second step is to move the first auxiliary into the first part of the sentence. So if we are going to do that, we are going to have a question: has done gone somewhere? Now let's proceed to the third example. The third example that we have is the declarative sentence: the first exchange student is arriving sometime. In this case, the third sentence doesn't also require the word do because same with the previous reasons, it has an auxiliary, which is the word is. The second step is to move the first auxiliary, and we have the question: is the first exchange student arriving sometime? And let's proceed to the fourth example. We have here a declarative sentence: the police are on the corner for some reason. Same as with the previous three examples, this sentence doesn't also require the word do because we have an auxiliary, we have the main verb be, and our main verb be in this sentence is the word are. So the second step is to move the main verb be in the first part of the sentence. So if we are going to do that, we are going to form a sentence: are the police on the corner for some reason? So if you guys noticed, the final questions that we formed became the yes or no questions. Now let's proceed to our last example. So we have here the declarative sentence: the committee invited someone. In this case, we have a different example this time around. It became different because it already requires the word do. Main reason is that we don't have an auxiliary. So we are going to insert the word do beside the word invited because the word do will act as an auxiliary or the helping element of the verb invited. If I'm going to read the sentence that already has a word do, it will be: the committee did invited someone. It became did instead of do because our verb is a past tense. And let's proceed to the second step. the next thing that we're going to do is to move the auxiliary do in the first part of the sentence. So it goes like this. Did the committee invite someone? So those are the examples of the initial steps in transforming a declarative sentence into a WH questions. If we stopped at this point, we would have a yes or no questions in most of the examples. However, the WH question transformation adds a substitution step. In order to ask for a specific information, it replaces the indefinite expression, and those are the someone, something, somewhere, and so on, with the appropriate interrogative word. In this part, it will be going to discussed by Miss Pineda. That ends my discussion. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Mercado. The substitution step affects the sentence given as follows. Played someone the solo, it will be substitute to appropriate WH word. Played who the solo. Will the judge decide something? It will be let's substitute the appropriate WH word to will the judge decide what? Has done gone somewhere? Let's substitute the appropriate WH word to has done gone where? Is the first exchange student arriving sometime? Substitute the appropriate WH word to is the first exchange student arriving when? Are the police on the corner for some reason? Let's substitute the appropriate WH word to are the police on the corner why? WH question transformation. If the unknown is not the subject and if there is no auxiliary verb or be verb, insert direct object as an auxiliary verb. Move the first auxiliary verb or the main verb, if there is no auxiliary verb, to the front of the sentence. Substitute an appropriate interrogative word for the constituent representing unknown information. Number 4, move the interrogative word to the front of the sentence. So that's all. Let's listen to the next reporter, Ms. Balanag.
Thank you, Ms. Pineda. In diagramming WH questions, first, we have SV or sentence type V, and it will be divided into two parts, namely noun phrase 1 or NP1 and verb phrase or VP, wherein under noun phrase 1 we will already put the committee, while under the VP there will be a division, or we will put a division, another division or another part, which is the MVP and NP2. And under MVP, there's also a partition, namely auxiliary and main verb transitive. And under auxiliary, we have WH question and the tense. And under the tense, we have the past, we will put past. And under the main verb transitive, we have invite. And lastly, in the NP2, we have someone, wherein the statement is, the committee invites someone. As represented in phrase marker trees, the underlying structure of WH questions includes both a WH question, node in the auxiliary, and an indefinite word or phrase representing the unknown information being requested. For example, like what I have said earlier, Before any steps of the WH question transformation have been applied, the question, "Whom did the committee invite?" has the structure represented in this diagram. After the WH question transformation has been applied, the phrase marker 3 for the same sentence would look like this. So first we have SV or sentence type V, and we will have branches, 4 branches specifically. So the first branch is the noun phrase to, the second is auxiliary, the third is noun phrase 1, and the fourth one is the verb phrase. So under the NP2, we have the WH word, which is the whom. Under auxiliary, we have did, and under NP1, we have the committee, and under verb phrase or VP, we have MVP, MVPTR under MVP, and finally we have the word invite. And the form question is, whom did the committee invite? And if we will diagram it with the use of the Reed-Kellogg diagram, this is how it will look like. That concludes our discussion concerning the yes or no questions and WH questions transformations. I hope that you've learned something from our group. Thank you for listening. God bless and have a great day ahead. Bye!